23dB Production Studios in the Garden State, New Jersey, this is The Art of Music Tech with your hosts, Fela and Dennis.
Let's go, and welcome to the Art of Music Tech podcast. I'm your host, Fela, and over there is Dennis.
What's up, guys?
And we're still in sunny California for NAMM. And also, right now, we're on the Sony lot in the bakery mastering facility with the one and only Jett Galindo.
Hey,
Hi,
guys.
Jett.
Mastering engineer.
Yeah.
Sound Girls member.
Yep.
All of that. I've been a part of some really big albums. I'll let you get into some of the albums that you've mastered on.
Most recently, I was fortunate enough to be part of the two Weezer albums that are coming out. And it's led by Eric Boulanger, who owns Bakery Mastering, but it's all hands on deck for the Weezer albums. So the Black album that's coming out and the Teal album that was just released and announced yesterday, which is a surprise album of Weezer just doing these amazing selection of covers, just because the Africa cover that they released just got a lot of attention and everyone enjoyed it, so they just went crazy with this Teal album.
Can you name any of the covers that's on there?
Well, now they've announced it, but they did Eurythmics' Sweet Dreams are made of this.
Ooh.
They did Electric Light Orchestra, Mr. Blue Sky, and my favorite surprise is TLC's No Scrubs, which is right there. And you can tell they were having fun, and that's the best part of the album.
Yeah.
But they also arranged it. They produced the covers album in such a way where if you watch Weezer live, that's how the covers album is going to sound exactly like it. It's not like an overproduced album. You can just tell the band's having fun, and that's what's great about it. So yeah, the Black album is also coming out too. So other stuff that I've worked on, there's this Richard Carpenter led album of the Carpenters with the Royal Philharmonic that came out last December. So that we just worked on. It's actually a selection of all the classic Carpenters music, and they were able to take Karen Carpenter's amazing vocals and
all her original,
and Richard Carpenter did this amazing rearrangement of orchestral backing music for Karen Carpenter, and he conducted the Royal Philharmonic, and it was recorded and mixed by Al Schmidt. So it was definitely an honor to be part of that too. And the vinyl for those albums, the Carpenters, Weezer, the vinyl was also cut here. So a lot of fun stuff. And then there's always this amazing queue of independent artists that bring their work to us. And there's this big boom in a certain genre that I think not a lot of people expected was gonna be huge, but video game music. We've been getting a lot of video game soundtracks in, and there's a record label that's just focusing on video game music that's been really investing 100% on the quality, and we wanted to make sure that we deliver on that. So we master for a lot of their music, and we also cut vinyl. We've done a lot of double LP vinyl releases for this video game label, and the fans just are super supportive in the video game community. So yeah.
You did La La Land. You did
yes,
Green
we also
Day.
did. Yeah, we also did La La Land. We also mastered Blade Runner, 2049, the new movie that came out. I probably wasn't old enough for the original Blade Runner yet. Green Day, definitely. We also did Colby Calais, Barbra Streisand, the Netflix documentary that came out. The music for that was mastered here. Even the music that was used for the actual documentary was mastered here, and was also released as a DVD special and CD. So, yeah.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So let's take it back now. Now that we know what you've done. What's the story of Jett Galindo? Where are you from? Your parents? How did it start?
So my full name is Joan Jett Galindo. So I think from there, a lot of people can already tell that my parents are kind of like music focused. I always joke that they're cooler than me because who would name their kid Joan Jett? My parents.
And
So
you're from the Philippines.
I'm from the freaking Philippines. And the thing is, when I was growing up, the kids don't know who Joan Jett was. My parents did, but the kids didn't know who Joan Jett was. So everyone just made fun of me as Jet Plane, Jet Li. So, but I always knew that I was named after a rock star. So like I carried that with pride, and I still there was this Make It Equal profile, and one of the questions are, name one artist that you want to work with. The answer is simple. Like, let's work, Joan Jett. I'm here. Like, Green Day is awesome, but Joan Jett.
Yeah.
So anyway, just to go back to the beginning, my parents are actually musicians, and my family's bread and butter. We have an unconventional background. My parents actually trained and managed just cover bands in the Philippines, even when back in the 1980s. So they did that. My dad used to work at the Navy, and my mom was a nurse. But my eldest sister, who was just a baby, was afraid of my dad anytime he comes back from like a 6-month trip with the Navy, because my sister wouldn't recognize the dad anymore, our dad, because like he has this big beard and he wasn't around all the time, and my dad couldn't stand it. It's like he left the Navy so he can be a family man, and both my mom and my dad have a musical background. So they decided, let's just start this thing. Let's train bands, and let's just manage them and see how it happens, because there's a very vibrant music scene in the Philippines. Like, there's a lot of bars and clubs where cover bands just go just do their thing. And there's actually documentaries that discuss how there's a lot of cover bands in cruise ships in Hong Kong, in Dubai, that are Filipino, because music is big in the Philippines. So, but my parents are still considered unconventional, and I was just brought up. Our house had a music room where musicians trained. I was just exposed to music every day, and it's not fancy stuff. It's pop, it's rock, and it's like what's out there, and it's always fun. Like, when I was a kid, I would one of my tasks was to just watch MTV and to just like see what's out there that's nice. And I just had fun. That's how I discovered Mariah Carey. I even recommended Snoop Dogg to my parents. Of course, they didn't end up using Snoop Dogg, but yeah. So me and my sisters were just like focused on MTV rather than like Nickelodeon, or ours is MTV. It's fun.
Oh, okay. So that was to find songs to cover for your parents, to keep them up to date.
Not necessarily. It's just like what we love
to do anyway.
Yeah. I just went harder and like made notes.
Yeah.
I even remembered who were the directors for each music video, like Katie Wood, Wayne Isham. So music was just a big part of me growing up. But my parents also didn't want me to pursue music. Me and my sisters were not allowed to like pursue music in college, because them being musicians, they feel that it's a gamble. And I'm happy for them that they did well, because one of the bands that they manage, who's actually, many of the band members are my relatives, ended up getting picked by a record label in the Philippines and came out with albums, and it turned out very successful. And now my parents and the band travel worldwide every year, and I'm actually going to see my parents in Vegas in March. The name of the band is Aegis, Aegis, Aegis. I don't know how you pronounce it here, but in the Philippines it's Aegis, and it's just like rock. It's original rock music, composed by my uncle, and they sound like heart. So it's like that old school rock, but it got so successful that there was a musical of purely AG's music in the Philippines. So that's how there was the tour this year is a 20th anniversary concert for the band. So
All right.
they did really well on that front. So but my parents still feel that whatever success they had, a lot of that, besides being good, is there's a lot of luck. So they had me take I had to take a different degree in college. I have a degree in psychology. But I was still active in music. I toured with a choir in college, and I've always known that I wanted to pursue a career that combines music and technology, because my dad also like encouraged me to tinker with computers and stuff. That's how I learned to be savvy with building websites and maintaining just the back end of like building your own computer and all that stuff. So I wanted to combine both, but I didn't know what was out there because there's no audio engineering degree in the Philippines. But when I toured here in America with my choir back in college, I met my friend GP, Gianpaolo, who said, you should check out Berklee College of Music because there's a program called Music Production and Engineering. And at that point, everything just clicked. Like before that, I was like a lost like person, not knowing what to do. But then when I discovered this career path, that's when everything just got laser focused. And from there, it's like I knew exactly what to do. Pursue audio engineering, but since it's not available in the Philippines, I just want to be sure that I'm prepared enough before I even audition for a college program here in the US. So I was lucky enough that after graduating from college, I actually found a commercial recording studio that needed an intern. It just fell on my lap because I didn't know that there was a studio in that media facility, but I know that they were looking for someone to be in charge of the media training facility that teaches web design, graphics, film to pastoral workers. It's very specific. So for a while, I actually taught video editing, web design, Photoshop to priests and nuns. It's a religious media communications facility.
Oh.
So yeah, but that is actually a established popular media facility. They're called Jesuit Communications, and they are known like. Again, music is very vibrant in the Philippines, and there's this music group that is known all over the Philippines for their church music, and it's like very pop, Christian praise,
new age,
like very pop praise music, and it's this label, the Jesuit Communications, that produces these albums. And I've always loved their music, but I didn't know how to like reach out to them. I just know that this company needed someone who would organize workshops to teach friggin' priests and sisters how to use the friggin' computer. And I had the in, and that's where I gave my 100%. But during my interview, I told them I wanted to be a sound engineer, and my plan is I'll eventually go to the US to study audio engineering. And just so happened that they needed an intern for their recording studio. And oh my gosh, the timing was just perfect. So one thing I like to mention on my profiles is that I almost didn't get hired for the studio because the head sound engineer, he said yes to training Jett Galindo as an intern. But a day before, the senior sound engineer realized that Jett Galindo was a girl. If he found out earlier that it's a female, he would have said no. But at that point, it was too late. So he just had to like suck it up. And I had to suck it up because he was like, he made it clear from the beginning that you're not meant to be here. But there were two interns, me and the other guy. And the other intern just couldn't handle a 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. internship because there was a choir recording that was happening at that time. And I understand it. It's an unpaid internship and he has to like work. and I have to work. But luckily, where I work and where the internship is in the same place. But I just gave my 100%. My parents hardly saw me, but they knew the hustle because they're musicians as well, and I already got my degree, so they can't complain. So, yeah. So at that point, it's like I actually ended up being really good friends with my mentor. So I always see him now as my mentor, Robbie Grande, who's the senior sound engineer in the Philippines. And he was the one who taught me all I know from the very beginning. So I really came in just fresh, like a newbie. He was laughing because the first thing I did was he asked me to EQ a cello. And I ended up EQing it to sound like a violin. That's just how like unexperienced I was going in. But I just wanted to learn and did what I can. So I eventually became the main full-time engineer of the studio. I worked there for over 4 years. So starting as an intern and then just going all the way as a in-house recording, mixing and mastering engineer. But all of that I learned from Robbie. So Rob, yeah. But yeah, at that point, that's when I went to the U.S. to do my auditions for Berklee, and that's when I got accepted in the music production engineering program, and the rest is history. So from there, there were a bit of like, again, like success is never a linear thing. There's always like this weird spiral. Sometimes you feel that you're going back, but it's not. It's a spiral. It's not like linear one way going
straight line.
It's not a straight line. It's spiral because you feel that you're going back, but no, it's like you're going,
moving along.
You're going somewhere. But throughout the journey, when I was in Berklee, I was already I had a very strong interest in mastering, and that's how Jonathan Weiner, the head of the mastering professor, he just knew that I was one of those students who wanted to learn more, and but after Berklee, I worked as a recording engineer for Jerry Barnes at Avatar Studios, which is now Power Station in New York. But through Jonathan Weiner, there was like a word of mouth where the mastering lab is seeking out the next right-hand man for Doug Sachs. And they sought out Berklee and asked every professor who would they recommend. So I got recommended by Jonathan Weiner, and I was all the way in New York, but I just put in my application, got the phone interview with Doug Sachs, drove to New Hampshire to meet the previous engineer that I was going to replace because he had to move to New Hampshire. And that's when I got the job. And I left everything in New York to work for Doug. But also, while that was happening, my whole visa situation was happening. And fortunately for me, Doug, the guy that I had to replace is Korean. And the whole thing of like hiring an international and helping with the visa, Doug was familiar with already. So I had 1 month left on my visa when I took the job. I already had all my visa paperwork done with my New York boss as a petitioner. I had to scrap everything and start from zero.
From scratch.
So I actually gave my application to another colleague in New York who also needed to eventually get a artist visa and have Jerry Barnes as a petitioner, just so I could at least have all my work be used by someone. So it's
stressful.
It's a journey for everyone. Everyone has a story, and that's my that's mine. And from there, working with Doug,
and Doug Sachs again. That's coming to LA. That's how you ended up.
And even though I'm not in the mastering lab anymore, it's still very much like the spirit of the mastering lab is felt here at the bakery because Doug Sachs passed away in 2015. And the rest of the mastering lab crew wanted to live on his legacy. There's no other thing, like, like no question, we wanted to continue this. So Eric, who's one of the head sound engineers at the bakery, opened the bakery. Head engineer of the mastering lab, along with Doug and Robert Hadley, who's another head master engineer. Eric wanted to do this 100%, and that's when he put all this investment to putting up the bakery. And it's still the same team. It's Eric, me, and James Carino, who was the studio manager of the mastering lab. So it still feels like family, and it still feels like this is the mastering lab team just continuing on. And we actually have a new person join our team. His name is Peter Hewitt Dutton. And he was a mastering engineer at Metropolis, and he joined us, and he's now the one holding down the fort in the vinyl room, while Eric and I focus on the mastering side. So, but all of us master and cut vinyl, but it's now easier for us to make sure that all rooms are running 100% of the time. So, yeah. That's
You gotta pay rent too.
exactly.
Gotta make
Hustle.
sure
Totally.
you get that cash back. Okay. All right. So how long you been in LA?
Officially 2015. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I did a lot of moving. But Chris, my boyfriend, and I had this talk recently. LA is now officially the city where I've lived the longest.
All right.
Because I was in Boston for about 3 years, almost 2 years in New York, 3 years in Ojai, where I worked at the mastering lab, and then it's now going for 4 years in LA. So a lot of
Alright.
moving. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
But bakery is here to stay.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. You had a lot of the move too, especially you too, Dennis.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, New York is the longest place I've been at now.
me too.
At 10 years.
With William Sonoma friend. What's his name again?
Harry.
Yes, my next door neighbor.
By the way,
over the top there.
Let Harry know that we mastered the Trisha Yearwood album that is now exclusively distributed at William Sonoma.
Williams.
It's so random.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think it's not.
I know. Hey, Jett Galindo.
Jett Galindo, let's go.
Yeah, bakery project is in Williams Sonoma. That's what.
That sells bakery utensils.
Yes.
full circle.
Make a full circle right here. Oh wow.
Okay. So where you working now? And what's the next project then?
Like I was
Future.
telling you both today. Today's gonna be a tight schedule just because of the NAMM show happening at the same time and the Sound Girls event happening at night. But today, I just finished the test cuts for a video game soundtrack that I mastered, and it's also gonna be released on vinyl. And it's already been announced. It's the Celeste video game soundtrack. So Celeste is a popular indie video game right now, and it's been receiving a lot of awards, and a lot of recognition is going towards the actual music itself. And now there's an official release of a Piano Collections soundtrack, where it's the Celeste video game soundtrack, but in solo piano. It's very relaxing. It's amazing, and it's performed by Trevor Allen Gomez, and it's released by Materia Collective, and it sounds amazing. Mixed by Will Kennedy. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar, but he engineered. He's worked on One Republic and U2, and now this Piano Collections album for a video game soundtrack. So yeah, I'm finishing up the vinyl masters for that. And sometime today too, I'm gonna be working on some 2 singles that are coming out for this punk artist. The artist name is Illuminati Hotties, and the artist behind it is Sarah Tudson, and she's been mentioned in NPR for her music. I've actually gotten a lot of punk clients because they heard my work on Illuminati Hotties and they really like the sound. You guys should check out that album.
Okay.
All right.
And yeah, and a pop acoustic single that just came in. So it really varies. Like there are days where we work on like hard rock Weezer in the morning, and then there's like this Japanese jazz at night.
Yeah.
So yeah, it that's what I love about mastering.
Do you give yourself a time limit on each song? Do you kind of like, I gotta knock this out in 2 hours? So
Well, so the one unspoken like thing when mastering is that although it's not really a set rule, it's always more effective for the mastering engineer to work on an album just continuously. Like you don't work on half of the album now and work on the next half the next day, because you want your ears to be in that zone when you're working from the first track all the way to the last. Because one of the things you handle as a mastering engineer, one of your tasks is to ensure the continuity of the vibe from beginning all the way to the end. So that even includes making sure that the spacing for one song to the next feels right, the fade out, just the levels, the EQ, everything is continuous. So you want to, if you're ever, there are times where it's like a 30-40 track album, or if it's a huge sound library of 50 tracks, then the idea of continuity isn't as essential, because it's a sound library. It's not meant for listening from beginning all the way to the end. But yeah, in terms of like time limit, like you need to give yourself as the mastering engineer space when you get started on a full album. You can take breaks for sure, but yeah, it's always good to work on a full album just straight, because you want to keep that zone. For singles or for shorter EPs, I don't necessarily impose a rule that I should be working on this one song for 1 hour, because there are songs that take 2 hours and some songs that take 15 minutes. Because a lot of, especially for an album, it's always the first songs that take the most time, because that's when you're trying to get to know the music. And most of the time, once you've figured out the first 3 songs, it's pretty much you're already in that zone, you know, and then you've already understood the intent behind the music, and now it's like, okay, you've nailed all your settings for the first few songs, and it's most likely gonna, just because the goal is to have this continuity and that consistency with the vibe that you've created for the first few tracks, that's pretty much gonna be how you want to retain it all the way to the end. So the first few tracks are gonna take longer, but then as you go along, it gets faster. And then there are some songs where so it's pretty much the priority is that you get to a point where you as a mastering engineer enjoy, like you personally get to a period, to a moment musically that you're really enjoying how this music is turning out, rather than looking at the clock.
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes it could take a whole day working on one song, but the goal is that at the end of the day, no matter what genre you personally are into as a human being, the goal as a mastering engineer is to enjoy the music. Like you are doing some adjustments on the EQ, on the compression limiting, that achieves that level of fulfillment musically to the sound. Yeah, so it varies.
We got so much equipment in front of us. Can you break it down? Your process and equipment. I see LA2A, Shadow Hills.
So
Oculus.
Well, again, there's really no one rule, but our philosophy at the bakery, which is also the same with the mastering lab, is it's not about the quantity of the equipment, but just making sure that you attain the best sound in your signal chain with the least amount of steps. Because the goal is that you achieve your job as a mastering engineer with the shortest distance between the music and the ears, because throwing a lot of things on the signal chain that does not add to the music, it's just going to take away from the fidelity of the music. So even back in the mastering lab, all we had was 2 types of EQ, and they're both analog, custom modded EQ, and they're shelf EQs even. It was purely shelf EQs at the mastering lab, but it's all custom made, and there were only 2 choice of line amps, tube and solid state. And we have the LA2As that have been custom modded to the. There's actually a mastering lab modification for the LA2As, and it's something that you can purchase. It's the history of the mastering lab. Doug actually auditioned multiple compressors, and he ended up choosing the LA2As as his compressor of choice, but then he had to modify it so that it works best for mastering. And it's not even a secret what it does. It's more like having a slow attack, slow release on the LA2As. So just those are the tools that we had in the mastering lab. And the mastering lab actually follows the same layout we have here at the bakery, where the console is behind you as the mastering engineer. If you notice, when you were listening to the tracks a while ago, that's how we work too. There's nothing between the speakers and the ears, because your main tool are your ears, and not having anything between the mastering engineer's ears and the speakers also take away one big factor in terms of like the accuracy of your listening environment. If you have like the giant console in front of you, you're going to be introducing a lot of reflections that will influence the accuracy of the sound. So it actually knocks out like a lot of things just by moving the console back behind you. But it has a very steep learning curve, and fortunately for me and Eric, we were both trained to master that way from the beginning. I mean, I learned at the mastering lab as well. I learned at Berkeley to master. But in terms of like being a full-time mastering engineer, that's how we were taught to work. So when Peter joined us from Metropolis, we already knew, even Peter knew that it's going to take him a lot of time just to get accustomed to the layout of the studio. So yeah, the reason I mention that is because it's not really about the gear, but it's about using your ears and
acclimated to your mixing position too.
Exactly.
And yeah, I mean,
exactly. Like human ears are like the great thing about just how the human body works is it's so malleable. It's not digital in a way where it's like we have like step like positions. There's something, again, it's like something very human where you can't really fully describe how complex the ears can work. So yeah, it's making sure that you utilize the amazing instrument that you have. And so as for our tools here at the bakery, so back at the mastering lab, it's purely analog. Even vinyl cutting can be purely analog. We can cut from tape straight to the cutting lathe without introducing any.
You have a tape machine there too, right?
Yeah, we have a tape machine. We don't introduce any digital conversion. It just goes straight to the cutting lathe. Here we have a more hybrid setup, and hybrid is the most popular setup for mastering studios nowadays. And we definitely rely still on the line amps of our choice back in the mastering lab, and so we also have the line amp and the tube line amp and the solid state line amp that we audition between anytime we want to choose. So the tube has like a warmer fuller sound, and I really enjoy how the transients come out on the tube lineup. But Solid State has a very clean, modern sound that sounds great with electronic music. So yeah, that's a very simplified way of describing the two lineups. And I really enjoy our Manly Massive Passive EQ. So we have the Massive Passive right there.
I see it.
And then the Shadow Hills that you're seeing isn't actually part of our chain. So we don't have the Shadow Hills mastering compressor. What we have here is the Oculus. So the Oculus is actually our monitoring panel. If you look for the Oculus online, there's actually a function on our Oculus that's not available because it's something that's just built for our function.
Custom?
Yeah, it's custom made. Eric has a background in electrical engineering. He went to Carnegie Mellon as an electrical engineer. And at the mastering lab, he was the head tech as well. So a lot of the schematics, we have, Eric just knows a lot of the equipment at the mastering lab by heart. So like we can easily rebuild the lineups from schematics. And also a lot of the equipment we have, like the JCF DAC, the converters that we have is Josh Florian built. So look up the company JCF Audio. They're a boutique company, and it's owned by Josh Florian. So they even build preamps and converters for Capitol. And he started out at the mastering lab as well. So he builds a lot of our stuff too. Even our vinyl preamp, it's also made by him. So yeah, a lot of stuff we have here is custom made for our needs. We, in terms of plugins, again, this is a hybrid setup. We use a lot of UAD, and Isotope's a tool that we use a lot as well. I love the RX. So yeah, like nothing just beats RX when it comes to, there are a lot of things that in order for us to really bring out the best in our masters, like sometimes it always rides the fine line between making the best masters versus reaching to the point of distortion. So there are cases where rather than changing our overall chain just to compromise avoiding that distortion, sometimes we just make sure that we dial in the best sound, and if it only causes a distortion in a certain part, that's when we just tackle that using RX. And with a lot of classical, there's a lot of classical productions that come here, and it would still have a lot of noise, extraneous noise from the actual recording. And at the mastering stage, a lot of those tend to come out more. That's why we use a lot of RX just to address those things. And something that's more creative use of RX is sometimes with our mastering setting, there's going to be like one specific thing where suddenly the sibilance just gets very harsh and bright only for a certain point, and RX can use that to just soften that sibilance only at that certain point. So it's a great tool to have. And I like FabFilter a lot as well. So I like to switch between FabFilter L2 and Ozone for limiting. I tend to prefer Ozone with classical, and FabFilter is just amazing with modern music. So yeah, that's the tools that we have.
Well, you did a couple of songs for us.
Yeah, sounds awesome.
Yes, thank you for the awesome sounds.
You guys did it.
What did you use on that? Like Deep in the Sea. Like,
hold on, let me just.
All right. Hey.
Let's take a look.
Yeah, okay. She's walking down to the actual session to tell us what she did.
Do you keep notes, right, for every session?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So you can go recall digital and analog.
Exactly.
Okay.
Back at the. Do you guys still hear me?
Yep.
We sure do. Okay.
Back at the mastering lab, since everything is analog, every our recall sheet is paper.
Oh.
And even the like we even do automations, like the way we do automations in, let me just take a picture so I can get back there to turn you guys.
Okay, yeah, please. And then break it down for us.
Yep. This is Deep in the Sea. You guys can edit this out.
No, we don't have to. Why?
Back at the mastering lab, how we automate is that we really ride the
Fader,
the
what? Knobs,
the
okay.
faders. That's how we do the automations. And when we write down our notes, we actually note the times when we do the automations.
Oh.
That's how precise the automations can get.
What software you use for mastering?
For the actual mastering stage, we use Sadie, DAW.
Okay. Never heard of it.
So Sadie is very specific to the mastering world. There's a lot of software that is just for mastering. It's funny because there's no one popular mastering DAW. There is Pyramix.
Okay. Sequoia, right?
Sequoia, Soundblade, Wavelab.
Oh, okay. Too many.
So it varies. Yeah, there's really no one. But Sadie is a British brand, and Sadie is very popular with British mastering studios. Abbey Road and Metropolis uses it. I know that Lursen Mastering uses Wavelab. We use Sadie. And I'm not sure when that transition to Sadie back at the mastering lab started, but I'm pretty sure that we use a lot of British products, actually. We use Prism products.
Converters? Prism?
Yes.
Okay.
ATC is a British brand.
Yep.
Sadie is a British brand. I'm pretty sure that Peter is pleased that he's seeing a lot of British brands. He's British, Peter from London. But I feel that a lot of it stemmed from the mastering lab being good friends with James Guthrie, who was the longtime producer of Pink Floyd, and Doug mastered Pink Floyd, and James Guthrie introduced Doug to the ATC speakers, and Doug hasn't looked back since.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
So
let me.
All right, let's go, Jett.
Okay, let me look at the settings. All right, so for Deep in the Sea, we actually use a solid state line amp, and then added some. We added some air at the top, and let me see, and we use the Fab filter. For Fab filter L2, there are actually mastering shapes that you can choose. Do you guys use Fab filter?
I'm familiar with Fab
Yeah,
filter.
so you guys should I encourage everyone that when they try Fab filter to really do a critical listening of the different shapes on their mastering plugin, because it's really drastically different. And certain shapes just work for certain music. I actually worked on a track just yesterday where the mixer did an amazing job. Lynn Graber, I can't properly pronounce it, but a lot of mixers send their mix in non-limited and a limited version. And this is always a popular question with us, if we're going to be using the limited or the non-limited version. Do we impose a certain headroom when mixers send in their work to us? The answer is we don't impose a headroom, and many times mixers send in mixes that's already fully limited because they have a certain flavor when they have their 2-bus processing. That's why mixers would send that version versus a version with no processing of their tuba, so there's more headroom. And it's up to us which we want to choose. But many times we work off of the limited version because these mixers have a certain flavor, certain sound that is that characterizes their mix in general. And if we feel that constitutes a very big part of the sound of the mix of the music, we respect that. And our goal is to see if there's any way to enhance it even better. And funny enough, for this track yesterday, it didn't need any processing on our end because the limited version sounds amazing already. I was actually telling our studio manager that, but all it took to really take it to that point of like really bringing the best out of the music is just the fab filter in dynamic setting. That's it. It doesn't pass through our analog chain. It's purely digital. There's no clip gain. Purely just the fab filter in dynamic setting. And that just made all the difference. So yeah, I used actually the dynamic setting for Deep in the Sea. And
so you add air before or after dynamics?
Before.
Okay.
Before. Actually, the fab filter is going to be the very last thing on the chain. Because that's the limiter. Because at that point, that's when the whole mastering chain now reaches the full level. And then fab filter just does an absolutely amazing job with trimming the transients just to really make sure that a 13 size foot can fit into a 7 size shoe. And if you add any more processing after fab filter, that's gonna lead into clipping distortions. So fab filter is gonna be the last on the chain typically.
All right.
And for Z, this is interesting. We have another thing on our chain that's called PEP. It's actually just a processing. It's a 2-channel processing built by Josh Florian of JCF Audio, that just adds that warmth and just articulation in the bottom end. And I actually passed Z through that because it needed that articulation in the bass. So, but it's something that we use sparingly because it could introduce some boominess when not used properly. But for that one, it just asked for it. It's great. And then we use the tube line amp for that because the warmth of combining both the PEP and the tube line amp just made all the difference. And I actually, I did. It looks like I added a lot of low end. I'm very careful with adding low end. Because you don't want to muddy up the mix. I'm pretty sure that on my plugins, because I didn't load up the plugins just now, because I'm pretty sure that many times I'll have a combination of low shelf EQ that clears up certain frequencies at the low end, but then pass it through PEP, tube line amp, and then probably at 25 hertz, half a dB boost, just to balance out and still retain that articulation at the low end. So yeah. So there's a lot of things. You can't predict what you're going to be doing on the day of the mastering session. And even if you listen now, like we worked on that track like several months ago. And at this point, it's like just by listening to the music, I can't actually remember what I've worked on. It's like you have to go back to the session and look at what you've done. Because a lot of things happen when you're in the zone.
Yeah.
All right. Wow. Well, thank you for a breakdown for us. And yeah. Wow, we're here on Sony a lot with Jett Galindo.
At the bakery.
At the bakery.
Wow. That was great.
Yeah.
Jett.
That was great too.
Yeah.
Fela.
So wow. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll have you on several more times because when you come for AES, we gotta hang like we did before. So
we'll hang at the Amex Lounge.
Amex Lounge. Yes, exactly. So
thanks for having me, guys.
Yes. We're glad to finally make it to the lot. We're gonna have some drinks tonight at the Sound Girls mentoring event. And shout out to them.
Yeah.
Because that's how we met.
Exactly.
So
it's amazing how Sound Girls does an amazing job of really getting together all the female professionals in this industry.
And it's a tiny world anyway. I don't know why we didn't really know each other. That's crazy, but now we do, and we're going to continue to know each other for a very long time. Thank you again,
and
Jett.
continue using your service too. Mastering. Yes.
Our own. We're gonna be we send our own stuff out here. So
let's go.
Thank you again, everyone, for listening. Please share, leave comments on iTunes, rate us. Again, we're available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Podbean. Thank you once again from my guest, Jett Galindo.
Thank you. I actually subscribe to the Art of Music podcast through Google Podcasts.
Yes, and Google as well. All of the good stuff. We're on all the good stuff.
Yeah.
Even if we don't know it sometimes. So again, thank you from Jett Galindo, Dennis, and myself, Fela. Let's go.
Let's go, guys. Let's go, Jett.
Thank you.
For more information of booking 23DB Productions, visit their website at 23dbproductions.com. Like and follow 23DB Productions at Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter for the latest work.